The secure communication terminal in Jake Morrison's modest apartment crackled to life at 0347 hours, jolting him from restless sleep. 20 years of military conditioning kicked in as his hand automatically reached for the encrypted receiver, muscle memory overriding the grogginess that came with retirement. "Captain Morrison?" His voice was steady despite the early hour. "Jake, this is Admiral Chin. We need you back in the service. Immediately." Jake sat up straighter in bed, recognizing the voice of his former commanding officer. Admiral Sarah Chin had been instrumental in his career, and he'd served under her during the Martian colonial defense operations. Her calling him directly meant something significant was happening. "Admiral, with all due respect, I've been retired for 3 years. I'm 45 years old and my reflexes aren't what they—" "Jake, stop." Chen's voice cut through his protests. "The dark world has opened another wormhole. This time it's in our solar system." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. The dark world, humanity's name for the mysterious hostile force that had been systematically conquering star systems across the galaxy for the past decade. Their technology was superior, their tactics ruthless, and their ships could traverse impossible distances through artificially created wormholes that bent space-time itself. "Where?" Jake asked, already knowing the answer would change everything. "Jupiter's orbit. Long-range sensors detected the spatial distortion 6 hours ago. The wormhole stabilized near Europa. Intelligence suggests they're planning to use Jupiter's gravitational field as an anchor point for a massive invasion fleet." Jake was already moving, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. "How long do we have?" "Unknown. Could be days, could be hours. Our deep space observation posts went dark 2 hours ago. We have to assume they're already through and establishing a foothold." "What's the mission?" "We need someone to get to Europa without being detected. The mining colony there has been evacuated, but the infrastructure remains. More importantly, there are prototype defensive installations that were never fully activated. Quantum plasma cannons that could punch through their shields if properly deployed." Jake paused in pulling on his boots. "You want me to go alone?" "Not exactly alone. You'll have a team, but you'll be mission commander." "Jake, I won't lie to you, this is essentially a suicide mission. We're asking you to position yourself directly in the path of an alien invasion force with experimental weapons that may not even work." "Why me?" "There are younger officers, more current pilots. Because you're the only person who's been to Europa and survived contact with dark world technology. The Kepler station incident 3 years ago, you're the only human who's engaged their ships in direct combat and lived to tell about it." Jake's hand unconsciously moved to the scar running along his left arm, a memento from that encounter. He'd been leading a patrol near the outer colonies when a dark world scout ship had appeared without warning. The brief engagement had cost him his ship and nearly his life, but he'd managed to destroy the enemy vessel with a desperate ramming maneuver. "The prototype cannons," Jake said. "What's their operational status?" "Installed but never tested under combat conditions. The theory is sound. They can generate focused plasma beams with enough energy to disrupt dark world shield matrices. But Jake, the power requirements are enormous. You'll be drawing directly from Europa's geothermal taps, and there's a chance the first firing could overload the entire system." "Meaning?" "Meaning you might get one shot before the installation destroys itself. Maybe more if you're lucky." Jake finished dressing and moved to his kitchen, starting coffee out of habit. The familiar routine helped him think. Through his apartment window, he could see the lights of New Geneva sprawling below, millions of people going about their morning routines, unaware that humanity's survival might depend on the decisions being made in the next few hours. "What about support? Backup?" "The main fleet is mobilizing, but they're at least 48 hours from Jupiter even at maximum burn. Earth's defense grid is being activated, but if the dark world establishes a beachhead at Europa, they'll have a staging ground in the heart of our solar system. By the time our main forces arrive, it might be too late." Jake poured coffee with steady hands, considering the implications. Europa had been humanity's first successful colony in the outer solar system, established 15 years ago to mine the rare minerals found beneath the moon's ice sheet. The colony had grown to nearly 50,000 inhabitants before the current crisis, making it the largest human settlement beyond Mars. The colonists evacuated over the past 6 hours. Emergency protocols activated the moment we detected the wormhole. They're aboard transport ships heading for Mars. All of them? A pause. Jake, there's something else. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working on Europa when the evacuation order came through. She's the lead scientist on the quantum plasma cannon project. She refused to evacuate. Jake nearly dropped his coffee cup. Elena, brilliant, stubborn, beautiful Elena. They'd worked together during the weapons development phase, and their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper before his retirement. She'd stayed on Europa to continue her research while he'd returned to Earth, unable to handle the isolation of the outer colonies. Is she safe? For now. She's in the main research facility, heavily shielded and supplied for several weeks. But Jake, if the Dark World secures Europa, she'll be trapped there with nowhere to go. The personal stakes had just risen dramatically. Jake drained his coffee and moved to his closet, retrieving the military gear he'd hoped never to need again. His flight suit still fit perfectly, and his sidearm was cleaned and maintained despite his retirement. What's my transport? A stealth reconnaissance ship, the Shadow Runner. It's equipped with the latest cloaking technology and enough firepower to handle light resistance. Your pilot is Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos. She flew covert operations during the Titan uprising. Jake remembered Santos, young, aggressive, skilled beyond her years. If anyone could get him to Europa undetected, she could. When do we launch? 1 hour. There's a transport waiting downstairs to take you to the spaceport. Jake, I want you to understand what we're asking. You'll be going into hostile territory with minimal support, using untested weapons against an enemy we barely understand. The odds? Admiral, with respect, I stopped caring about odds when they blew up my ship at Kepler Station. If Elena is on Europa and the Dark World is coming, then that's where I need to be. I was hoping you'd say that. Jake, there's one more thing. Intelligence suggests the Dark World isn't just planning an invasion, they're looking for something specific on Europa. Something that might explain why they've never established permanent colonies before, why they've always moved on after conquering a system. What kind of something? We don't know. But Elena's research into quantum field manipulation might be connected. The timing is too coincidental. Jake slung his gear bag over his shoulder and headed for the door. Then we better make sure they don't get it. Jake? Good hunting. The line went dead, leaving Jake alone with the weight of what lay ahead. Outside, he could hear the distant rumble of spacecraft launching from the military spaceport, the sound of humanity mobilizing for war. As he walked to the elevator, Jake wondered if this would be the last time he saw Earth. The transport was waiting as promised, a sleek military vehicle with polarized windows. As they sped through the pre-dawn streets toward the spaceport, Jake used his portable terminal to review everything they knew about the Dark World. The enemy had first appeared 7 years ago at the edge of the galaxy, systematically conquering human colonies and alien civilizations alike. Their ships were biomechanical monstrosities that seemed to grow rather than be built, powered by energy sources that human science couldn't explain. They left no survivors, took no prisoners, and showed no interest in communication. Most disturbing was their apparent ability to adapt. Each encounter showed evidence that they had learned from previous battles, incorporating captured technology into their own designs. Some xenobiologists theorized that the Dark World wasn't a single species but a collective consciousness that absorbed and assimilated other forms of life. The spaceport was a scene of controlled chaos. Military personnel moved with urgent efficiency, preparing ships and loading supplies. Jake could see the massive launch platforms where Earth's main battle fleet was being assembled, dreadnoughts, cruisers, and carriers that represented humanity's most advanced military technology. But it would take time to organize such a force, time they might not have. The Shadow Runner sat on a smaller pad away from the main fleet, a sleek black ship designed for speed and stealth rather than firepower. As Jake approached, a figure in a flight suit emerged from the ship's airlock. Captain Morrison? I'm Commander Santos. Welcome aboard. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos was younger than Jake had expected, probably early 30s, with the lean build and alert eyes of a pilot who'd seen combat. Her handshake was firm, and Jake could see the confidence that came from surviving dangerous missions. Commander, what's our flight time to Europa? At maximum stealth velocity, about 18 hours. We'll be running silent most of the way, using Jupiter's radiation belt to mask our approach. Any sign of dark world activity? Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures near Europa, but the radiation interference makes it impossible to get detailed readings. Could be their ships, could be something else entirely. They boarded the Shadowrunner, and Jake was impressed by the ship's interior. Despite its modest size, it was packed with advanced systems, quantum computers, adaptive camouflage, and weapons that could punch above the ship's weight class. Captain, Santos said as they settled into the command deck, I've read your file. The Kepler station incident. How did you survive that encounter? Jake strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat as Santos began the launch sequence. Luck, mostly. And the fact that dark world ships seem to have a blind spot in their aft sensor array. I managed to get behind their scout ship and ram them before they could bring their main weapons to bear. But you've actually seen them up close. The ships, I mean. Close enough to count the scars on their hull. They're not like anything we've built, Santos. They look organic, almost alive. And they repair themselves. I watched hull breaches seal up in real time. The Shadowrunner lifted off smoothly, rising through Earth's atmosphere with barely a vibration. Within minutes, they were clear of the gravity well and beginning their journey toward Jupiter. Captain, there's something else you should know, Santos said as they settled into cruise mode. I've been tracking communications intercepts for the past few hours. There's been chatter about evacuees from Europa. Seems not everyone made it off the moon. Jake's blood went cold. How many? Unknown. Could be a few dozen, could be more. Some of the mining crews were deep underground when the evacuation order came through. The transport ships couldn't wait. And Dr. Vasquez? She's definitely still there. Her last transmission was 2 hours ago, confirming that the quantum cannon systems are online and ready for activation. Jake stared out at the star field, Jupiter still invisible at their current distance. Somewhere ahead, an alien invasion force was preparing to strike at the heart of human civilization. And the woman he cared about was directly in their path, along with weapons that might be humanity's only hope. Commander, how fast can this ship really go? Santos smiled grimly. Faster than the manufacturer recommends. Why? Because I have a feeling 18 hours might be too long. The Shadowrunner cut through space like a blade, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. Jake spent the first few hours of their journey studying everything they knew about Europa's layout and the quantum cannon installations. The colony had been built around 3 main facilities. The primary mining complex, which extended deep beneath Europa's ice surface, the research station where Elena worked, and the defensive installations that had been constructed over the past 2 years as tensions with the Dark World escalated. The quantum cannons, Jake said, reviewing the technical specifications. They're not conventional weapons. Santos nodded, adjusting their course to take advantage of asteroid field cover. From what I understand, they manipulate quantum fields to create focused plasma beams. The energy output is supposed to be enormous, enough to overload Dark World shield systems. But they've never been tested in combat. No. Dr. Vasquez's team ran simulations and low-power tests, but the full-scale systems have never been fired. The power requirements would drain Europa's entire energy grid. Jake studied the schematics more carefully. The cannons were positioned at strategic points around Europa's surface, connected to the colony's geothermal power system by massive conduits. Each installation was designed to operate independently, but they could also be linked for coordinated fire. If Elena is still at the research station, Jake said, she might be able to activate the entire network remotely. Assuming the Dark World doesn't detect and destroy the installations first. 6 hours into their journey, the Shadowrunner's sensors began picking up the first signs of activity near Jupiter. The massive planet's electromagnetic field created a natural barrier to detailed scans, but they could detect energy signatures that didn't match any known human technology. "Multiple contacts," Santos reported, her voice tense. "At least a dozen large vessels, possibly more. They're maintaining position near Europa's orbit." Jake leaned over the sensor display, studying the readings. The dark world ships registered as massive, irregularly shaped objects that seemed to absorb and deflect sensor beams. Their energy signatures were unlike anything in human databases: chaotic, organic, almost alive. "Any signs they've detected us?" "Negative. The stealth systems are holding, and Jupiter's radiation is masking our approach." "How close can we get?" "I can put us in Europa's shadow, maybe 5,000 kilometers from the surface. But once we're in the inner moon system, we'll be exposed if they're running active scans." Jake made a decision. "Do it. We need to know what we're dealing with." The next few hours passed in tense silence as they approached Jupiter's gravitational influence. The massive planet dominated their view, its swirling atmosphere and great red spot clearly visible. Europa appeared as a small, ice-covered sphere in the distance, barely distinguishable from Jupiter's other moons. But as they drew closer, the true scope of the dark world presence became apparent. "My God!" Santos whispered. Surrounding Europa were ships unlike anything Jake had ever seen, even at Kepler Station. They were massive, some easily a kilometer in length, with organic curves and surfaces that seemed to shift and flow. Smaller vessels moved between them like insects around a hive, and Jake could see energy discharges that might have been weapons or tools. "Count them," Jake ordered. "I'm reading 23 large vessels, dozens of smaller ones." "Captain, this isn't a scouting force, this is an invasion fleet. And they're all focused on Europa." "Why? What's so special about a mining colony?" Their answer came in the form of a transmission, picked up by the Shadowrunner's passive sensors. It was Elena's voice, transmitted on an emergency frequency. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez at Europa Research Station Alpha. If anyone receives this transmission, be advised that hostile forces have landed on the surface. They are not attempting to occupy the colony, they appear to be searching for something specific. The quantum cannon installations remain operational, but I cannot activate them without proper authorization codes." The transmission was followed by coordinates and technical data, then silence. "She's alive," Jake said, relief evident in his voice. "For now," Santos replied grimly. "But if the dark world is searching for something, how long before they find the research station?" Jake studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the dark world ships and the locations of Europa's defensive installations. A plan began to form in his mind: dangerous, probably suicidal, but potentially their only chance. "Santos, can this ship's weapons punch through dark world shields?" "Against their smaller vessels, maybe. The capital ships? Not a chance. We don't need to destroy them. We just need to distract them long enough to reach the surface." "Captain, with respect, that's insane. We'd be facing an entire fleet with one small ship." "Not facing them. Avoiding them. Look at their positioning, they're concentrating on the side of Europa facing Jupiter. If we approach from the far side, using the moon itself as cover, we might be able to reach the surface without detection." Santos studied the tactical display, running calculations. "It could work, but landing would be the easy part. Once we're on the surface, we'd be trapped. No way to reach orbit again with all those ships waiting. One problem at a time. Our mission is to activate those cannons. If we can do that, maybe we can level the playing field." Santos was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "All right, Captain. Where do you want to land?" Jake brought up Europa's surface map, studying the locations of the quantum cannon installations and the research station. "Here," he said, indicating a point roughly equidistant from 3 cannon emplacements. "It's close enough to reach the installations on foot, but far enough from the main colony to avoid detection." "Understood. Beginning approach maneuvers now." The Shadow Runner altered course, swinging wide around Jupiter's gravitational field to approach Europa from its night side. As they drew closer, Jake could see the scars of dark world activity on the moon's surface. Landing sites carved into the ice, energy discharges that had melted huge craters, and movement that indicated ongoing activity. "They're definitely searching for something," Santos observed. "Look at those excavation patterns. They're not random. They're following some kind of systematic grid." "Elena's research," Jake realized. "They're looking for her quantum field experiments." "But why?" The question would have to wait. As they entered Europa's thin atmosphere, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. "We've been detected," Santos announced. "Multiple contacts converging on our position." Through the viewports, Jake could see dark world fighters rising from the surface, sleek, predatory shapes that moved with unnatural fluidity. Their organic appearance was even more pronounced up close, with surfaces that seemed to ripple and flow. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake ordered. Santos threw the Shadow Runner into a violent series of turns and dives, using Europa's low gravity to perform maneuvers that would have been impossible in Earth's atmosphere. Energy beams flashed past their ship, and Jake could see the alien fighters adapting their attack patterns in real time. "Landing site coming up," Santos reported through gritted teeth. "I can put us down, but it's going to be rough." "Do it." The Shadow Runner slammed into Europa's ice surface with bone-jarring force, skidding across the frozen landscape before coming to rest against an ice ridge. Emergency lights flashed throughout the ship, and Jake could hear systems shutting down. "We're down," Santos announced. "But the ship is disabled. Main engines are offline, and we've lost primary power. Can you repair it?" "Maybe, given time." "But Captain, we've got company." Through the ship's sensors, Jake could see dark world ground units approaching their landing site. They moved across the ice with disturbing grace, their forms shifting and adapting to the terrain. "How long do we have?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. Jake was already moving, gathering equipment from the ship's armory. Europa's environment required full environmental suits, but the moon's low gravity would make movement easier. He selected weapons that he hoped would be effective against dark world technology: plasma rifles, electromagnetic pulse grenades, and a portable fusion cutter. "Santos, I need you to stay with the ship. Try to get the engines back online." "Captain, you can't go out there alone." "I won't be alone for long. Elena is at the research station, and she has the activation codes for the quantum cannons. If I can reach her and get those weapons online, we might have a chance." Santos hesitated, then nodded. "The research station is 12 kilometers northeast of here. There's an access tunnel that connects to the main colony. You can reach it without exposing yourself on the surface." "And the quantum cannon installations?" "The nearest one is 5 kilometers east. But Captain, without Elena's authorization codes, you won't be able to activate anything." Jake sealed his helmet and checked his suit's systems. Europa's radiation levels were manageable, but the cold was extreme. His suit's heating system would keep him alive for several hours, but hypothermia would become a factor if he was out too long. "Keep trying to reach Earth," Jake told Santos. "Let them know we're on the surface and attempting to activate the defensive grid." "Will do." "And Captain? Good luck." Jake cycled through the ship's airlock and stepped onto Europa's surface. The landscape was alien and beautiful, endless ice plains broken by ridges and crevasses, all under the looming presence of Jupiter in the star-filled sky. But the beauty was marred by signs of dark world activity, strange, organic structures that had been grown rather than built, and energy signatures that made his skin crawl even through the protection of his suit. He set off toward the research station, using his suit's navigation system to plot the most direct route while avoiding areas of obvious alien activity. The low gravity made movement easier, but the ice was treacherous, and he had to be careful not to fall into hidden crevasses. Behind him, he could see lights moving near the Shadow Runner's crash site. The Dark World forces were investigating, but Santos was right. They had maybe 15 minutes before the aliens reached the ship. As he moved across the ice, Jake tried to understand what the dark world was looking for. Elena's research into quantum field manipulation was cutting edge, but was it really so advanced that it would attract the attention of an interstellar invasion force? The answer came to him as he crested a low ridge and saw the dark world excavation sites in the distance. They weren't just searching randomly. They were following energy traces, looking for something that generated quantum field distortions. Elena's experiments had created those distortions. Somehow, her work had attracted the dark world's attention, drawing them to Earth's solar system like a beacon. Which meant that the quantum cannons weren't just humanity's best hope for defense. They might be the very weapons the dark world had come to capture or destroy. The race was on, and Jake was running out of time. The access tunnel to Europa's research complex was hidden beneath a layer of artificial ice, designed to be invisible from orbit. Jake found the entrance using coordinates Elena had transmitted, grateful that the dark world forces hadn't discovered it yet. The entrance was secured with both physical and electronic locks, but Jake's military clearance code still worked. The tunnel stretched for nearly 3 kilometers through Europa's ice layer, carved by mining equipment, and reinforced with metamaterials supports. Emergency lighting provided a dim glow as Jake made his way through the passage, his footsteps echoing in the narrow space. Halfway through the tunnel, he encountered something that made his blood run cold: dark world technology. The organic structures had somehow penetrated the tunnel system, growing through the ice like cancer. They pulsed with their own internal light, and Jake could see movement within their translucent surfaces, something that might have been circuitry or blood vessels. He drew his plasma rifle and approached carefully. The structures didn't react to his presence, but they were clearly monitoring something. As he passed one of the larger growths, his suit's sensors detected quantum field fluctuations, the same kind of distortions that Elena's experiments had generated. The dark world was tracking the quantum signatures, following them like a trail that led directly to the research station. Jake moved faster, knowing that time was running out. The tunnel eventually opened into Europa's main underground complex, a vast network of chambers and passages carved from the moon's rocky core. The colony had been evacuated in haste, leaving behind equipment and personal belongings that gave the place an eerie, abandoned feeling. Emergency lighting was still active, powered by the geothermal taps that provided Europa's energy. Jake consulted his map and headed toward the research section, moving through corridors that had once housed 50,000 people. The research station was located in the deepest part of the complex, protected by multiple layers of shielding and security systems. As Jake approached, he could see that the blast doors were sealed and the corridors were empty. But there were signs of recent activity: equipment that had been moved, sealed containers that hadn't been there during his last visit. Elena was definitely still here. He reached the main laboratory entrance and activated the communication system. "Elena, it's Jake. I'm outside the lab. Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was no response. Then the blast doors cycled open, and Elena Vasquez emerged from the laboratory complex. She looked exactly as Jake remembered: brilliant, determined, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional standards. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the kind of practical jumpsuit favored by research scientists. But there were signs of stress around her eyes, and Jake could see that she was running on adrenaline and caffeine. "Jake!" She rushed forward and embraced him through their environmental suits. "Thank God you're here. I thought, when the evacuation orders came through, I hoped they would send someone, but I wasn't sure." "I'm here," Jake said simply. "And we need to get those quantum cannons online. The Dark World has an entire invasion fleet positioned around Europa." Elena's face went pale. "How many ships?" "At least 20 capital vessels, dozens of smaller ones." "Elena, they're not here for the colony. They're here for your research. I've seen their technology spreading through the access tunnels, following quantum field signatures." "That's impossible. My experiments were contained, shielded. Apparently not well enough. They've tracked the quantum distortions all the way from wherever they came from. Your work is what brought them here." Elena was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. If that's true, then the quantum cannons might be exactly what they're looking for. The technology could be adapted, weaponized in ways we never imagined. All the more reason to make sure they don't get it. Can you activate the defensive grid? Yes, but there are complications. The quantum cannons require enormous amounts of power, more than Europa's normal energy grid can provide. I'll need to tap directly into the moon's geothermal core, and there's a risk of destabilizing the entire system. What kind of risk? Catastrophic failure. If the power surge is too great, it could trigger seismic activity that would crack Europa's ice shell. The entire colony could be destroyed. Jake considered the alternatives. And if we don't activate the cannons? The Dark World establishes a foothold in our solar system and uses it as a base to conquer Earth. Then we don't have a choice. Elena nodded grimly. I'll need to access the central control system. The quantum cannons can be activated remotely, but the power coupling has to be done manually from the geothermal station. Where is that? 2 kilometers deeper, at the bottom of the mining complex. Jake, there's something else. I've been monitoring Dark World communications. Their technology seems to be based on quantum entanglement networks. If I'm right about their interest in my research, they might be trying to establish a permanent link between Europa and their home territory. A permanent wormhole? Exactly. Which would make invasion fleets unnecessary. They could move troops and equipment instantaneously across galactic distances. The implications were staggering. If the Dark World could establish permanent wormhole links, no human colony would be safe. They could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. How long would it take them to set up something like that? Unknown. But if they're already following quantum field traces, they're probably close to locating the main laboratory equipment. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the complex. Emergency lights flashed red, and automated voices announced a security breach. They've found the main entrance, Elena said, checking her monitoring systems. Multiple contacts moving through the colony levels. Jake drew his weapons and moved to cover the laboratory entrance. How long do you need to activate the cannons? 20 minutes to reach the geothermal station, another 10 to initialize the power coupling. But Jake, I'll need covering fire to get there. The Dark World forces are between here and the geothermal access points. Then we move together. Can you fight? Elena pulled a plasma pistol from her equipment belt. I've had basic combat training. But Jake, these aren't human soldiers we're dealing with. I've seen their technology adapt in real time, learning from each encounter. I know. I've fought them before. They gathered essential equipment, Elena's authorization codes, portable quantum field generators, and enough weapons to make their way through the colony. As they prepared to leave the laboratory, Jake took one last look at Elena's research equipment. The quantum field manipulation devices were unlike anything he'd seen before, elegant combinations of advanced technology and theoretical physics that pushed the boundaries of human understanding. If the Dark World captured this technology, they would gain capabilities that could make them unstoppable. Elena, if we can't hold them off, if it looks like they're going to capture the research equipment. I've already considered that. There's a self-destruct system that will destroy the entire laboratory complex. But Jake, that would also destroy any chance of humanity developing quantum-based defenses. Better than letting the Dark World have it. They left the laboratory and began moving through Europa's underground passages, heading toward the geothermal station. The colony's layout was complex, designed to maximize space while providing protection from radiation and meteor impacts. Under normal circumstances, it would take hours to traverse the entire complex. But these weren't normal circumstances. As they moved through the corridors, they could hear sounds of the Dark World advance, energy discharges, structural damage, and something else that Jake couldn't identify. It sounded organic, like breathing or circulation, but on a massive scale. They're not just using technology, Elena whispered as they crept through a maintenance tunnel. They're growing it, spreading it through the colony like an infection. Through ventilation grates, Jake could see Dark World constructs moving through the main corridors. They were humanoid in general shape but clearly not human, tall, angular figures in what might have been armor or might have been their actual skin. They moved with fluid grace, and Jake could see that their equipment was seamlessly integrated into their bodies. Biomechanical, Elena observed. The line between organism and machine has been completely eliminated. Can we hurt them? Unknown. But plasma weapons should disrupt their quantum field matrices, at least temporarily. They reached a major junction in the colony's transportation system, a hub where multiple corridors converged around a central lift system. The geothermal station was directly below them, accessible through maintenance shafts that dropped through Europa's rocky core. But the junction was occupied. A dark world construct stood guard at the lift controls, its elongated form perfectly still as it monitored the passage. Additional constructs moved through the connecting corridors, their movements coordinated in a way that suggested hive-mind communication. We need a distraction, Jake whispered. Elena checked her equipment. I have experimental quantum field disruptors. They're designed for research, but they might confuse their sensors long enough for us to get past. Do it. Elena activated the devices, and Jake immediately felt a strange tingling sensation as quantum fields fluctuated around them. The dark world constructs reacted instantly, their forms shifting and adapting as they tried to compensate for the field distortions. No, Jake said. They rushed from cover, heading for the lift access. The dark world guard turned toward them, but its movements were sluggish, confused by the quantum interference. Jake put 3 plasma bolts into its center mass, watching as the energy discharges caused its form to flicker and destabilize. But instead of falling, the construct began to adapt, its internal systems compensating for the damage. Within seconds, it was moving normally again, advancing toward them with obvious hostile intent. The lift! Elena shouted. They reached the access shaft as more dark world constructs converged on their position. The maintenance lift was designed for equipment transport, not passengers, but it would carry them to the geothermal station. As they descended into Europa's depths, Jake could hear energy discharges above them. The dark world forces were pursuing, but the narrow shaft would limit their ability to bring weapons to bear. How much further? Jake asked. Another kilometer. But Jake, once we reach the geothermal station, there's no other way out. If they follow us down there, we'll deal with that when it happens. The lift reached the bottom of the shaft, opening into a vast chamber that housed Europa's primary geothermal tapping system. Massive conduits drew energy from the moon's molten core, while quantum regulators maintained stable power distribution throughout the colony. It was here that Elena would need to reroute Europa's entire energy grid to power the quantum cannons. The control systems are over there, Elena said, pointing to a complex array of equipment. I can initiate the power coupling, but Jake, the energy surge might be detectable across the entire solar system. Earth will know what we're doing. Good. Maybe they can send reinforcements. Elena began working on the control systems while Jake established defensive positions around the chamber. The geothermal station was huge, with multiple levels and access points that would be difficult to defend with 2 people. As Elena worked, Jake monitored their surroundings for signs of pursuit. The dark world constructs would be following, but the narrow access shaft would slow them down. Maybe they had enough time to activate the cannons before. An explosion echoed through the chamber as dark world forces blasted through the primary access shaft. But instead of individual constructs, what emerged was something far worse. A dark world ship, impossibly compressed and reshaped to fit through the shaft, flowed into the geothermal chamber like liquid metal. As Jake watched in horror, the ship began expanding, resuming its normal form in the vast space. Elena, how much longer? 5 minutes! She called back, her hands flying over the control systems. We don't have 5 minutes. The dark world ship finished its transformation, revealing weapons ports and sensor arrays that defied human understanding. But more disturbing were the constructs that emerged from the ship, dozens of them, moving with perfect coordination as they advanced toward the control systems. Jake opened fire with everything he had, plasma bolts and electromagnetic pulse grenades, creating a devastating barrage. Several constructs fell, their forms destabilizing under the combined assault. But for every one that fell, 2 more took its place. "Jake!" Elena shouted. "I need 30 more seconds!" 30 seconds might as well have been 30 hours. The Dark World constructs were advancing steadily, adapting to Jake's weapons with each exchange. His ammunition was running low, and the constructs were learning to avoid his most effective attacks. That's when salvation came from an unexpected source. The Shadow Runner burst through the chamber's ceiling in a shower of ice and rock, Commander Santos having somehow gotten the ship airborne again. The ship's weapons opened fire on the Dark World constructs, plasma cannons and missile systems creating devastation throughout the chamber. "Santos!" Jake shouted into his communicator. "How?" "No time to explain, Captain. The ship's badly damaged, but I can give you covering fire." Elena's voice rose above the chaos. "Power coupling complete. Initializing quantum cannon network." Throughout Europa, massive weapons systems came online for the first time. Jake could feel the energy surge through the moon's structure as geothermal power was channeled into the quantum field generators. Emergency lighting flickered throughout the colony as every available joule of energy was diverted to the defensive grid. "Quantum cannons online and ready to fire," Elena announced. "But Jake, I need targeting data." "The cannons are automated, but someone has to designate targets." "On it," Jake replied, accessing his tactical systems. Through his suit's connection to Europa's sensor network, he could see the Dark World fleet positioned around the moon. 23 capital ships, dozens of smaller vessels, all within range of the quantum cannons. "Targeting priority vessels," Jake announced. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. Europa's quantum cannons fired as one, sending focused plasma beams across space toward the Dark World fleet. The beams were invisible in the vacuum, but their effects were immediately apparent. Dark World shields flared and overloaded as quantum field disruption tore through their defensive systems. 3 capital ships were destroyed outright, their organic hulls unable to withstand the quantum plasma bombardment. Several smaller vessels were disabled, drifting helplessly as their power systems failed. But the remaining Dark World ships were already adapting. "Second volley," Jake ordered. The quantum cannons fired again, but this time the Dark World shields held. The enemy fleet had analyzed the first attack and modified their defensive systems accordingly. "They're learning too fast," Elena said grimly. "Each shot is less effective than the last." "Then we make every shot count." "Santos, can you get us out of here?" "Negative, Captain. The ship is held together with emergency patches and prayer. We're not going anywhere." Jake considered their options. The quantum cannons had inflicted significant damage on the Dark World fleet, but the enemy was adapting rapidly. Soon the weapons would be ineffective, and Europa would be defenseless. Unless they tried something desperate. "Elena, what would happen if we overloaded the quantum field generators? Instead of firing controlled bursts, what if we released all the energy at once?" Elena's face went pale. "Jake, that would create a quantum field cascade. The energy release would be enormous. It might destroy the entire Dark World fleet." "And Europa?" "Europa would be completely destroyed. The energy cascade would crack the moon apart." Jake looked around the geothermal chamber, at the advancing Dark World constructs, at Elena working desperately to maintain the cannon systems, at Santos fighting a losing battle in her damaged ship. Sometimes the choice wasn't between victory and defeat. Sometimes it was between dying with honor and letting evil triumph. "Elena, how long would we have?" "Maybe 10 minutes after I initiate the cascade. The quantum fields would need time to build to critical mass." "Long enough to evacuate?" "Not a chance. Jake, if we do this, we're not walking away." Jake activated his communicator, broadcasting on all military frequencies. "This is Captain Jake Morrison on Europa. We have engaged Dark World invasion forces with quantum plasma weapons. Enemy fleet has taken significant casualties but is adapting to our defensive systems. Recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel from Jupiter's orbital space. We are preparing to initiate quantum field cascade that will destroy the enemy fleet and Europa itself. He paused, looking at Elena and Santos, both of whom nodded their understanding. Tell Earth that the Dark World came here looking for quantum field technology. They were trying to establish a permanent wormhole link. We've denied them that capability, but they'll be back. Humanity needs to prepare. Elena's hands moved over the control systems, overriding safety protocols and beginning the cascade sequence. Throughout Europa, quantum field generators began building toward critical mass. Cascade initiated, Elena announced. 10 minutes to field collapse. The Dark World constructs seemed to sense what was happening. Their advance faltered as they received new orders, then reversed direction entirely. They were retreating, abandoning their positions and heading for their ship. They know, Jake realized. They understand what we're doing. The Dark World ship in the geothermal chamber began its own transformation, compressing itself for rapid extraction. But the cascade process had already begun, and quantum field distortions were making their technology unreliable. Jake watched as the ship struggled to maintain cohesion, its organic components fighting against quantum interference. Several constructs were caught in the field fluctuations, their forms destabilizing as the cascade built toward critical mass. Above them, through Europa's ice shell, more Dark World ships were attempting to escape. But the quantum cascade was expanding, creating a sphere of destructive energy that would soon encompass the entire moon. Jake, Elena said quietly, I want you to know. I know, he replied, taking her hand. I feel the same way. Santos landed the Shadow Runner nearby, its systems failing as quantum interference overwhelmed the ship's electronics. She emerged from the airlock and joined them at the control station. Not a bad way to go, she said, checking her weapons. Taking out an entire invasion fleet. Elena, any word from the Dark World ships? Are they escaping? Elena monitored the sensors as long as they remained functional. Some of them are clear of the cascade zone. Maybe half the fleet. But the others? The quantum cascade reached critical mass. Europa's core erupted in a sphere of pure energy that expanded at near light speed, consuming everything in its path. Dark World ships, orbital installations, and the moon itself were converted to plasma in the space of seconds. The explosion was visible from Earth, a new star that briefly outshone Jupiter itself before fading into cosmic background radiation. 6 months later, Admiral Sarah Chin stood before the United Earth Council, delivering her report on the Europa incident. The sacrifice of Captain Morrison, Dr. Vasquez, and Commander Santos saved not only our solar system but potentially all of human civilization, she told the assembled representatives. The quantum cascade destroyed approximately half of the Dark World invasion fleet and denied them access to quantum field technology that could have made them unstoppable. She paused, looking out at the faces of Earth's leaders. However, we must not allow their sacrifice to be in vain. The surviving Dark World ships have retreated beyond our sensor range, but intelligence suggests they are regrouping. They will return, and when they do, humanity must be ready. What do you recommend, Admiral? Asked the Council President. A massive expansion of our defensive capabilities, based on the quantum weapon technology Dr. Vasquez developed. We have her research data, transmitted to Earth before the cascade. We can build more quantum cannons, deploy them throughout the solar system. And if the Dark World has adapted to quantum weapons, then we adapt as well. Captain Morrison's final transmission indicated that the Dark World learns from each encounter, but so do we. The key is to stay ahead of their adaptation curve. Chen activated a holographic display showing Earth's defensive grid. I proposed the Morrison Protocol, a comprehensive defense strategy based on quantum field manipulation, rapid response fleets, and early warning systems positioned at the edge of our solar system. The cost would be enormous, another council member observed. The cost of failure would be the extinction of human civilization, Chen replied. Captain Morrison and his team proved that the Dark World can be defeated, but only through sacrifice, courage, and the willingness to use whatever advantages we have. She thought of Jake Morrison, the pilot who had answered the call when humanity needed him most. He had been a good officer, a better man, and in the end, a hero who had saved them all. The Memorial Fleet, Chen continued. 3 new ships named in honor of our fallen heroes will be launched next month. The USS Morrison, Vasquez, and Santos will be the first vessels equipped with quantum field weapons based on Dr. Vasquez's research. And if the Dark World returns before we're ready? Chen smiled grimly. Then we'll follow Captain Morrison's example. We'll fight with everything we have, and we'll make them pay for every inch of space they try to take. The Council voted unanimously to approve the Morrison Protocol. As Chen left the chamber, she received a priority message on her secure communicator. Long-range sensors had detected energy signatures at the edge of the solar system, quantum field distortions that matched Dark World technology. They were coming back. But this time, humanity would be ready. In the depths of space, construction crews worked around the clock to complete the new defensive installations. Quantum cannons based on Elena Vasquez's designs were being deployed throughout the solar system, powered by fusion reactors and protected by advanced shielding. The first line of defense would be at Pluto's orbit, massive weapons platforms that could strike at targets millions of kilometers away. The second line was positioned in the asteroid belt, mobile platforms that could be repositioned as needed. The final line surrounded Earth itself, a quantum field grid that could protect the home planet even if everything else failed. It was an impressive defensive network, but Chen knew it would only be effective if humanity remained vigilant. The Dark World had been driven back, not defeated. They would return with new tactics, new technology, new ways to adapt to human defenses. But they would also face a humanity that had learned from Captain Morrison's sacrifice. Never again would the Dark World catch them unprepared. Never again would they have to rely on desperate last stands and heroic sacrifices. The next battle would be fought on humanity's terms. As Chen looked out at the stars, she raised her hand in a silent salute to the heroes of Europa. Their sacrifice had bought humanity time, but it was up to the living to make sure that time was not wasted. The Dark World would return. Humanity would be ready.